Welcome to What Brought You Here Today, an interview-style mental health podcast that focuses on real experiences and how we navigate and move through them. The guests on this show provide personal and professional insight at times and come from all walks of life. Not all of the guests work in the mental health field, and they've all chosen to be brave and vulnerable while sharing parts of their story with you. Please keep your own mental health and well-being in mind while listening. The topics in this episode are sensitive. If you experience any distress while listening, please pause and return at a later time. Please take care while listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to What Brought You Here Today. I am your host, Ryanne, and today I am joined by Vanessa, the owner of a therapy practice here in Minnesota. She is a licensed professional clinical counselor, so LPCC, similar to me. And I think we're going to have a really good conversation about trauma, collective trauma, somatic practices, and kind of the events that have taken place here, particularly in Minneapolis in the past couple of months. So thank you for being here, Vanessa. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm so honored to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great to meet you as well.
I will let you give the listeners a little bit of your background and introduction.
Yeah. I'm Vanessa. I am the owner of Abound and Flourish Counseling and Wellness located in Minneapolis. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor, and my jam is kind of working with folks with complex trauma. And I use EMDR, Somatic Experiencing, and Anchor Network.
Oh, you're anchor trained.
Yeah.
Okay. I just finished the training in December. So
Yay.
cool.
Welcome.
So cool. Let's kind of just a brief high level. What are those three things? So somatic, EMDR, and anchored.
Yeah. So EMDR is something that uses bilateral stimulation. So it's a way that either uses eye movements or things that buzz back and forth to help you process trauma. The cool thing about it is you don't have to talk about it. It helps things kind of desensitize it, not feel so overwhelming. That's better known for single incident traumatic experiences. When it gets to complex trauma, I kind of use a little bit more somatic experiencing or anchored relational network. So somatic experiencing is just noticing sensations and feelings in the body and helping move this like stuck trauma energy. So it's very different than traditional talk therapy. And then anchored relational network, I think of it really as like a foundation. So it feels like you can really use it with anything, and it really helps you tune into dissociation.
Yeah. And really rooted in the competence and dignity of the person.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That's kind of the big, I guess, like line around it is that's what it's really rooted in. So I'm fresh out of that training. So still trying to conceptualize the whole framework, which is completely different than the way we're like traditionally trained.
It's so different. I think I'm still trying to figure it out at times too.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's just jump in.
Yeah.
I live in Minneapolis, like proper, more south. So just to give you kind of context as we jump in this conversation. And now I think that we're kind of, for the listeners, this episode is going to air in like March, April sometime. So hopefully a little bit, things will have quieted down a little bit more here, but I think we're still in that mindset of like, we'll believe it when we see it. But I want to really talk about the trauma that we've experienced. And, this isn't the first time our city has been in this kind of collective trauma aspect. We have George Floyd and multiple other things. So it's really been a lot, particularly probably the last 6 years. But what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah.
Big question.
Oof. Yeah. I mean, trauma is by definition too much too fast. I think for a lot of people, and trauma also is dependent upon support you receive after the event. And so unfortunately with this, I think a lot of people had to isolate or were shut down. Their homes were affected, their friends, their community members, their kids' friends. So I don't know what to think of it other than it's a really, really detrimental thing that happened to the community. And I think we're going to be seeing after effects for a really long time.
Yeah, I think we're already starting to see some of that too. I mean, just in terms of the work that I do, also a lot of my clients are from this area. So just the things they've experienced and had to kind of hold space for themselves because this isn't a normal or typical way to be in the world. And just thinking from the standpoint of we've literally been left to pick up the pieces, and what does that mean? And so I'm curious from you, like, how do you support someone in that part? Right? Like these people, these federal agents have come in here and like terrorized our city and they just leave.
in case, the St. Paul incident that happened last week was right outside my office, like on the sidewalk below my office. So, and it was literally like, we're going to crash into a bunch of cars. And then they just left. Like they got who they were after and left.
Yeah.
And I think a piece of this, and I'm also curious on your thoughts on this, of like the questioning around just like humanity and how humans can treat other humans this poorly, which I also recognize isn't a new thought.
Yeah.
But I think is really getting slammed into some people's faces, like firsthand.
Yeah. And for the listeners, I would even be like, if you can check in, because I even noticed like tightness in my chest as you name that. I think something that has happened a lot with clients and even myself is that this can feel really similar to other traumas people have had. So if you've experienced coercive control, if you've experienced abuse, chaos, all these different things, that can feel similar to what you've been through on top of this incident be collectively traumatic as well. And so it's really hard to separate and sift through all that.
How do you help clients or even for yourself to do that?
Yeah. The first thing that we do, and I think this is such a delicate practice where it's important to name how terrible things are and you can stay in that space. You can continue to be dysregulated, like it's an appropriate response. And we can't take action when we're in those shutdown responses or those collapse responses. And we also can't rest and we can't restore. And so the biggest thing that I've been helping folks with is how do we come back to something that feels safe or neutral? And then once we're there, how do you take action with something that aligns with your values?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it and to frame it. I think we're all wanting to do something and to do more things than we maybe have capacity for.
And some of that too can be related to trauma. So a lot of people I've seen oftentimes we get negative beliefs. And so if our negative beliefs are like, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough, I should do more, that's going to show up too. And unfortunately, that doesn't help when we're trying to take action.
When you bring in the values piece, how are you finding people respond? I think my initial thought is like, are values going out the window because of how terrible this is? Or are people, and maybe it's both, or are you seeing like kind of really grounding and rooting in those values to find what feels good?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think it's a complicated one. I go back to Phyllis as Dr. Solon is one of the people from Anchor Network. And what they've really talked about is if we can get back to our values, we're going to make a conscious, regulated response that keeps you safe and other people safe versus if we're doing a survival response, like if we're fighting back. Sometimes fighting is appropriate, right? Especially in some of the stuff we've seen. You have to do that. But in a lot of instances, it might actually create unsafety or it might be a reactive survival response.
Are you seeing people have more awareness of that piece of like, I'm doing this maybe out of that kind of response?
Yeah, and I wish this is the part of being a therapist. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish we could tell everyone like the beautiful things we're seeing because you hear so many awful things. But for example, like I work with a lot of people pleasers. If you're really used to people pleasing, it might be scary to repost something or like something or speak up or say something in your community. And I've actually seen people not do that survival response of people pleasing and speak up.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah. I think it's one of like when you get those feelings as a therapist, like the proud feelings, like you can watching your client find like kind of step into who they know they are and who they can be it's an honor. And it's such a lovely and just wonderful experience to be a part of. How much do you identify the collective trauma piece versus the individual piece?
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we're all experiencing this on so many different levels and experience trauma in general on different levels. And, we all come from like different backgrounds and cultural experiences and things there. So also recognizing that everyone shows up in response and reacts to trauma in a different way.
Yeah.
I think my thought is like, is identifying the collective trauma piece supportive rather than only focusing on the individual trauma piece? Like, and I feel like when I verbalize this, it's going to make it sound negative and that's not my intention, but I guess more shifting from like,
only my trauma matters to this whole trauma matters.
Yeah. And that's kind of what fascism and those things that are meant to like oppressive systems want it to be individualized, and they want it to be too much too fast so that we can't act. And so yeah, it's definitely collective trauma. And it's, from what I've seen, is we heal in connection with other people. And so people have really been able to come together and get support, and it's been amazing. And also it has left a huge rupture in the community.
Yeah, I think this is something we will be recovering from for no determined amount of time.
Yeah.
And I've, from my personal experience, and I work a lot with parents. I work a lot with moms. I work a lot with moms who have younger kids, and I have a young daughter myself. And just even having to have these really tough, difficult conversations. And I'm curious how you also, as a therapist here, like help someone acknowledge that that's not a normal parenting experience.
Mhm.
And what does that mean for our kids, right? Like I had to tell my husband, and I told our 5-year-old about Alex Preddy because the press conference happened to be on when she was like in the room, and I was like, here we go. we're doing this. And I feel very fortunate to be educated and be able to have verbiage and knowledge to explain it to her in a child way. But yeah, and as an aside, like I have an amazing therapist who helps me process my own feelings as a parent.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how that, like, just with your kind of the frameworks that you practice in, how are
Yeah.
you helping parents navigate that?
My heart goes out to parents. I'm not a parent myself, but have a lot of friends and worked with kids and families for years. What you're doing is kind of what I've been helping folks do. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, in order to help your kid feel safe, the first thing in that is you being grounded in a safe person as well. So again, it kind of goes back to like, are you telling your kid these things based out of fear, or trying to make sure they're safe, or your own traumas? Is your own stuff coming up? Or are you genuinely trying to help them identify like boundaries and safety and values and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. Very big conversations to have with little people.
And oh my gosh, the other tough thing about being a parent is that when kids went through things at your age, that trauma is going to pop up.
Yeah, that's such a great reminder. Yeah. I think that it's very easy to forget that piece, and that the re-traumatization happens so often. When you're doing the somatic work, are there any practices that people listening could do at home to help regulate, ground, get more
Yeah.
to that safer place, resourced place?
Yeah. I would say either something from Anchored, which is going to be using any of your senses, or even a memory. So sometimes when things feel so unsafe, it's hard to access something in the present moment, or all we can see is like, I have to clean these things. And so we just can't come back.
Sure.
So
I
memories
recognize that
can
feeling
work.
a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, What I would say is, if you can reach out to someone and connect, awesome. If you're not in a state or a place where someone's available, what somatic experiencing is all about is about creating connection with yourself or the present moment or safety to kind of pull you back. And so something that I typically start with for folks is to just gently look around the room. And if you want, you can try it with me.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just looking for something that's neutral or interesting or something you haven't noticed before. Noticing our guest bed is a little ruffled over there, and I'm just going to bypass that.
My thought was like, something's not quite clean over there.
Yeah. And when you notice those things, that is a state that your body's like a little bit in the fight or flight, or not quite in the present moment, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think, unfortunately, is also like the baseline that a lot of us are living in.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's a valid reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting, as I get older, I've realized that cleaning makes me feel safe and calm. And I genuinely think I grew up in a house that was like very well kept and cleaned a lot by my mom. But I think it's also like a way that I've learned to just get rid of the energy in a very fast way. If I just like rage vacuum the house quick, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah.
What does somatic mean?
Yeah.
Somatic means, in my understanding, again, everyone has a little bit different stuff, but it just means body sensations or physiology.
Yeah. I'm going to like swing a little bit here for a second because
Sure.
the past couple of days, so we're like mid-February right now, towards the tail end of February, but my Instagram algorithm, I had it pretty well curated to baby otters and like this Metro Surge stuff. So I was getting what I felt like was a nice balance. But
Yeah.
the last couple of days, I've started getting an influx of individuals trying to like debunk the polyvagal theory.
Yeah.
And I don't like, that's a whole off topic that we're not going to get into because I don't know enough about the debunking or the theory to speak appropriately on it.
Yeah.
But does somatic work, like the vagus nerve does exist. It is a real nerve in your body. And does somatic work tie into that of like, let's get this brain and body connecting more? I think this is coming up as we like talk about it because I had a really good therapist after I had my daughter, shout out to Jenna, who told me she would always tell me to like make whale sounds.
Yeah.
And I recommend that to clients all the time. I do it myself still like 5 years later.
Yeah.
But that's also like a somatic experience.
Yeah. I think that's called vooing. So vooing is
Is it?
a technique. Okay. Yeah. It's like a light foghorn where you just go voo and you try to get like vibrations to turn your somatic nerve.
I didn't know it actually had
Yeah. I think it's VUUING, if anyone is curious.
Yeah.
And it is a very nice, quick, that's a great thing you could try. However, if you're not used to being in your body, don't try that quite yet or do that with a therapist.
Yes.
Yeah.
What about the bilateral stimulation by yourself? So some gentle tapping or I know I recommend a lot of people even just walk.
Yeah.
Like just move your body because that is going to stimulate both sides of your brain.
Another quick one too is sometimes we're so immobilized or like, I know the first week everything happened. I tried to go to the gym and I was just too tired and wired and it just wasn't working. And so laying on the ground with your legs up against the wall, if you can do that for 1 to 3 minutes, it's going to put blood flow into the prefrontal cortex front brain part and help you feel a little safer too.
How do you talk to people about when their frontal lobe shuts off? I think we all have that's a broad term. I think people in therapy or people who have had some education on regulation understand that the frontal lobe shuts off, when we get into these fight, flight, freeze, fearful, paralyzed states. My conversations are a lot around with like what happens when kids' frontal lobes shut down.
Yeah.
So that parents can understand like development and that, and our adult frontal lobes like still shut down. We've just learned skills and tool. But so what does your conversation around that look like?
Yeah. What I explain to folks, and I think this is one of the coolest things that I have learned. It doesn't sound so cool, but talk therapy can be re-traumatizing for trauma. And so what I let people know right off the bat when we meet is that we may talk about tough stuff a little bit, but then if they notice numbness, if we notice overwhelm, if we notice feeling fine, but fine means I can't access any emotions, we're going to pause and come back to the present moment. Because when we're in a state where we can't access feeling or we're not able to kind of feel stuff within us, that's actually going to re-imprint trauma into your brain. So most people take that pretty well.
Sure.
They go, yeah, that makes sense. That's maybe why therapy hasn't worked in the past.
Yeah.
And so what I also explain too is that we do actual exercises. So for me, a lot of therapy is experiencing stuff. So I might have someone go back to a time when they felt good or present or proud of themselves or neutral. And we experience how that feels. And that's going to be how we access that prefrontal cortex. So the memory of like, oh yeah, I was connected with my kids. Like we played outside, we had a good day. I was patient. The more that you can remember that and come back to it, it's actually going to create more neurology to go between those trauma states to your like front brain parenting self or adult self.
I don't even know if there's a really good shortish answer for this, but when we're under this constant fear state, how are the memories and the experiences being stored?
Good question. I think for everyone's nervous system, it might be a little different, but
Sure.
ultimately they're probably not being stored or they're being kind of fragmented. So you might, if something's stressful or you think back to COVID and the first time you bought groceries, you might remember the smell of Clorox because that's what we did.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of chatter too of like the helicopters in the city
Yeah.
have become a really almost just like a constant re-trigger every time one goes up. And similar, to it's interesting that is we now associate it's not interesting. I mean, it is interesting, but like we now associate that noise with danger. Yeah, I think again, like the anchored relation training talks a lot about the neurology and how things are stored. And okay, so maybe as I'm talking this out loud of like, where does the dissociation come in from here?
Yeah. As you were talking, I kind of thought about, so the way that I explain trauma to clients is that if you get in a car accident, it's probably good to be vigilant, not hypervigilant, but vigilant as you're driving again, just to make sure you're safe, you're watching out, you're paying attention. If you get in another car accident within a month, we're going to be a little bit more escalated to pay attention. And so maybe if we got in a car accident with a truck, we might be so hypervigilant that we're looking out for every single truck. And at a certain point, hypervigilance becomes unhelpful because if we're so focused on looking for trucks, we might speed through a crosswalk and almost hit someone. Or we might get so stressed out as we're driving that after we just kind of crash, which is dissociation essentially, or we numb out throughout.
I think a lot of people maybe use the example too of like when you drive home from work and you don't remember getting from work to home. Yeah.
Yeah. And I let people know too, dissociation's a spectrum.
Yeah.
So on the end over here, you've got the like, I'm so bored, I'm zoning out, I don't have enough stimuli. In the middle, it's a little bit of like, this feels really overwhelming. I need a little bit of space or distance and again, I let people know it's not a choice to dissociate. It'd be great if it were, but it's not. And then on the far end is like loss of memories, completely being out of body, anything.
Sure.
And sometimes dissociation's helpful. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's also an important part to note is like, generally speaking, our responses serve a purpose in the moment and are generally protective.
Yeah.
It's really
always.
what happens after and how you either continue to use that response or how that response continues to show up in situations. Do you have a lot of clients who have been very active in this time, like the protesting and the community support, mutual aid, like all of the things that the city and state has come together to do? I'm curious, like how being involved changes the perspective and changes the aftermath, I guess.
Can you say more about the like perspective piece?
Yeah, I think are the people who are getting involved, however that looks, right, in a supportive way, are they able to kind of, I guess, like process and store this and see it differently than someone who is choosing not to? And I don't mean like not being involved because of safety reasons, because they literally can't leave their house. I mean, just like, and I think like removing political views aside from this, just like choosing to not acknowledge what's happening. And I guess like how is that shaping this experience for them and how the trauma is going to keep showing up?
Yeah, that's a good question. Most folks, I mean, I'd say 90% of people have done something, even if it's just donate money or bake cookies for their neighbors or protesters if they aren't able-bodied to walk. I do think it kind of mobilizes being able to complete a fight or flight response so that we don't feel so stuck.
Okay.
However, I think most of the folks, like if there's anyone who wants to do something but can't, to me, that just signals that their nervous system is doing something to protect them.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I think I recognize too that this is also fresh, that we have no idea to know like what this actually means for us in the short and long term. Yeah. I think I've found it very empowering and hopeful for people, myself included, of how everyone is showing up and how people continue to show up and how it's really, like all of these things change who we are. I think there's like, the neuroplasticity of it. Like these experiences are going to change us on some level. You just mentioned like kind of like the cycle of like I forgot the word you used, but thinking of like the burnout piece with it. How are you helping people, going back to the earlier
kind of topics of like, I should be doing more. I should be doing X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
I was one of them. I've been sick multiple times the last 6 weeks because of it. And finally realized, also like, yes, I'm a therapist and I know these things, but I'm also still a human being and like need to make sure that my daughter gets to school and from school safely and that like my community is safe too.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I think it's like I'm able to take a step back. I was like getting sick twice in 3 weeks is probably not a good thing.
Yeah.
And just like cut everything off. I was like, I have to take a step back from everything.
Yeah.
But how are you helping people recognize that that's okay?
Oh, that's such a good question. I feel that deeply. And I think the first 2 weeks where everything was happening, it was an awakening for myself too, of like, damn, this is really hard to keep coming back to the present or to make sure that my nervous system isn't in the shutdown state. And essentially what burnout is we've been in that fight or flight for so long. So we've been kind of wired. And we go, whether it's we can't stop looking at things or doing things or searching things. And at a certain point, our body can't stay in that. So it is going to crash, whether we get sick, we get burnt out, we can't take action, we're exhausted. For myself personally, it was that reminder of coming back to my more resource self of going, okay, I have helped people. That's my value and my ability is to help. And so being able to come back to that and realize that is how I help with my community and connect with other people. That created a lot more just ability to be present and alive.
Yeah.
But it was hard.
Yeah, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard when you're the first ones. Like no other city has been under attack. And I'm really proud of how systems were put in place and how we mobilized and how like everything happened so quickly.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's also incredibly taxing on your whole being to I think there's no pressure to be on all the time, but to feel like you have to be on all the time and to be able to keep doing that day after day after day and acknowledging and recognizing everyone has different capacity, right? I know plenty of moms who are literally doing it all and are thriving.
Yeah. And sometimes that's a survival response too, right?
For sure. Yes, for sure. Or they have different capacity, right? Like maybe no kids, maybe they work part-time, maybe they're, maybe they stay at home, like varying degrees of other responsibilities too going on around them and respond to things differently. Like every time and again, my therapist is amazing. And like the helicopters for me are really re-triggering back to George Floyd because we live close to the air base. Even just acknowledging that piece too of like being slightly paralyzed, like every time one is flying overhead, you mentioned like taking in the information and I got a brick like a month ago for phones, which is incredible. I don't know why I didn't have one like years ago. How are you helping? I love to hear like how other clinicians are helping people navigate their social media consumption right now because like we can't get away from it, especially here. It's relentless.
Yeah. Again, another good question. The amount of times that I have had to do EMDR with folks because of the images they witnessed that they just couldn't, they kept having flashbacks of, unfortunately was a lot. So a lot of it was trying to process what they have witnessed, which even just witnessing something can create trauma. And once we kind of were able to stabilize or ground again, it's how can you come back to this present moment? And sometimes we can't. Some things are so horrific.
Right.
But it's just knowing if you're witnessing things that are traumatic on social media, can you say, I don't want to see this anymore? Which it's a privilege. And sometimes watching someone be abused or shot, that can't just happen with watching one video and then processing it. And so what I've helped people kind of do is, again, of like, can we get back to a calmer or safer space and then be able to kind of tune into like what's going to help you. So for me, I think I was on social media quite a bit. I started knitting a ton. Like that was one way that really helped, or started watching just like really fluffy reality TV.
Love is Blind.
Yeah, I have not seen the newest season yet.
Girl.
I've heard it's interesting.
Train wreck again. Anyway, off topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, so knitting, watching fluffy reality TV. I think getting more to the analog is like the trending word is right now, and doing things that don't involve your phone.
Yeah. There's a word in somatic experiencing called titration, which essentially means how do you take something really massive and overwhelming and break it down into small things that are less overwhelming.
Yeah. If you are resourced enough to afford a brick and need some firm boundaries on your screen time, I highly recommend the brick. And getting more of those analog hobbies. I got a Myrtle. Have you heard of Myrtle? It's like a logic puzzle book. It's so good.
No,
It's so
fun.
good. But also took up things like embroidery and found other ways to do it. Because what I was noticing you also can't control what's popping up. Like every time you open Instagram and the feed refreshes, like you don't get a say unless you have those filters set right to only show your friends. Yep. You don't get a say to be like, NPR's putting out the video of a shooting. Like it's going to be there. And you cannot prepare for that. And I think we all want to know what's going on. So you can't also swipe fast enough to make it go away, because then you've kind of started a whole train of other reactions, and the urge to know what happened is going to be strong. Do you find people are bringing up a lot of previous traumas from the state in Minneapolis?
And I think it's a lot of me, of course, that's our job as a therapist, is to kind of notice patterns. I can't do that on myself. That's why I have therapists. But it's hearing someone say something. So someone might go, I feel so trapped and stuck, and I don't know what to do or when this is going to end. And in my experience with that human, I can go, yeah, this sounds a lot like something else. And so we don't have to say that this thing isn't traumatic, because witnessing what's happened in our community and being a part of it and seeing it is traumatic. But then again, typically trauma starts from somewhere. So a lot of times it starts from childhood, and then that childhood neurology pops forward. So if when we were stuck, we had to organize and clean our whole house or put things in order, if that's how we got safety, we might move a lot towards that.
Yeah. Do you ever get people, I think this is maybe sometimes just a misconception in general of therapists, that we can fix everything. Right? Like, and that we are, like miracle workers who can take the pain away. And I recognize, like, my clients too are like, can you just make me feel better? And my response is kind of like, unfortunately I can't, like, and it might take a long time for you to feel better. And what does better even mean?
Yeah.
But do you, like, for someone who comes to you and is like, just take this pain away, what do you say?
I mean, there's so much compassion in that, first of all. Like it's very tough to feel that much and tell someone you're feeling that much. And so it always starts with compassion, but then we kind of get curious about, like, well, what is the pain? What does it feel like? Can you name it? Is that too much to name it? What's happening? And so to me, what that is their nervous system might not have had someone to help with pain. They might not be used to feeling. We might avoid. Oh, this is too much. I don't quite want to feel it.
Yeah. I love the curiosity.
And I'm also honest.
Piece. Yeah.
Yeah. I wish I could fix my own stuff quicker than I could, right?
Same. I think I've learned like humanizing and kind of, like air quotes, like normalizing this experience. None of it's normal, but that we're all doing it together, right? This isn't like a single person experiencing this massive trauma, particularly related to this topic of, Metro Surge in Minneapolis. And that normal now looks different. And we have to adjust to those new routines. Like, now that we're kind of out of it, like a tiny, tiny bit of, like, I'm finding a lot of people are, I guess, like, sad or disappointed that these new things that we've implemented to keep our city safe are the new normal, and are grappling with, like, now I feel like I'm not doing enough, because getting extra groceries at Costco is just a part of my routine now. And okay, so I guess my question is, like, does that cycle ever end for some people?
Yeah. Like the cycle of grief or adjusting to the new normal.
Yeah. Or even, and like that constant urge to, like, do more. Like, now I'm getting extra groceries, and before that felt like I was doing something, but now it doesn't. So now I need to find something else.
Again, when I hear that, and I so deeply feel that, because as a eldest child, I'm used to doing a lot. And so
I recognize.
To me, again, I think that we might look at that and know that it started somewhere early.
Okay. Somewhere along the lines, you were programmed to believe you weren't doing enough or that you needed to do more in order to survive.
Yeah. And I feel like the caretaking aspect is really just very strong and like prevalent for a lot of people right now.
Yeah. And from a trauma aspect, that caretaking, that fawning, whatever we want to call it, that can be a survival response. So if we're doing it so much so that we don't have enough money for savings, or we're overextending ourselves, or we're getting sick, or whatever that might be, at some point that can become unhelpful. Versus if we can kind of come back to ourselves and our values, we might go, shit, am I allowed to swear? Should
No,
I
you're
not?
fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Yep, you're fine.
The only thing, that I have capacity to do today is to just check in with my neighbor or give my kid's friend a ride to school. I need one day off and I'm going to.
Yeah. I know we're getting like close to the end of our time here, but I think this is also too like challenging a lot of people's perspective on privilege and just their ability to keep showing up and to keep providing and to keep giving and to keep supporting, and what that actually means just in terms of like that cycle of keeping that cycle going. Like I'm just finding the privilege piece is like a really big conversation alongside all of these other conversations right now.
And there's a lot of guilt too in being able to take a day off or being able to remove yourself and take space. Again, where that starts to become unhelpful is if we shut down and go into shame, or if we stay in that guilt and shame and we can't reconnect with our kin, or we can't process the privilege that we have and choose to do something different.
Yeah, that's a good point around that. Is there anything that you want to add or that you feel is important for people who are listening to hear?
Yeah. I think for everyone in Minneapolis, Minnesota, I think just reminding yourself that having a reaction is a good thing. And no matter the way that your body reacts, it is okay. And to just keep taking care of yourself so that you can keep coming back in connection with your community.
Yeah. Where can people learn more about you? How can they find you?
Yeah. They can go to my website, aboundandflourishcounseling.com, and you can also go to my Instagram, which I believe is Abound and Flourish MN.
Okay.
And then I also have a Facebook, which is listed on my website too.
Okay, yeah. And we'll link it all in the show notes. You see clients in Minnesota. All right. I don't know that I have like many listeners outside of Minnesota. So,
Yeah.
but I will put everything in the show notes so that listeners can find you. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate you holding space and just talking about collective trauma and all of this.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you want to learn more or follow either of us on social media, you can find more information in the show notes. Thanks for your support and listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.